Hi, I'm Rashayla Marie Brown, the R&B, and this is Rage to Master. Welcome back, y'all. It has been a very long time since I've updated you with a new episode. And let's just say there are a lot of reasons for that. The main one being is that since I started this podcast, I'm just learning like most of y'all out here are learning. I don't think I had any real clue what it would take to build the kind of sonic universe that I was trying to make. I'm using a lot of archival footage, I'm using a lot of interview footage. It's more like a film. But this is true to my vision as an artist, and so this is the style that I want to keep up. But what that means is that I'm not going to really be able to produce every single week like a lot of podcasters do. I don't even think I'm going to be able to produce every single month. And I'm now going to call what was happening in episodes 1 through 3 a season 1. There was an emotional arc that we were going on in all of the works. Season 2, in addition to having some shorter form interviews as well as archival footage, I'm going to share a little bit more of my artistic process. And also, for the past 9 months since I've been able to share with you guys, I've actually completed a dissertation. That is, I am now officially Dr. R&B. I have completed my PhD, and in this field of performance studies, there's a lot of research that has to go into the different ways that you perceive what a performance is. And that's ultimately what this podcast is about in a lot of ways. The ways that living and being and doing in the world can be like a performance in and of itself. And all of the artists that I've spoken to so far are very interested in the scenario and the situation in which their work is being shown as much as the skill that it takes to produce it. And so when I began this journey, I don't think I had a clear sense of how much time it was going to take. I'm a one-woman show. I have different folks who have assisted with different parts of the audio or different parts of the graphics. But in general, I'm setting up the camera, I'm sitting in front of it, I'm writing the script, I'm contacting the people that I've interviewed, and I'm also going back into the archive to find the archival footage, such as what I showed in episode 3, which was the Still Black at Yale documentary that was directed by Monique Walton and Andia Winslow. Saying it all to say, I love talking and I love being in community with people. But the idea of facing a camera and trying to edit and come up with something compelling in this very oversaturated landscape is a little bit more challenging than I think that I had realized. However, I'm not going to give up because I'm a fighter. And I really think that there's something happening here in the podcast, whether it's a little bit of the behind the scenes of how the art world really works, or if it's you seeing how I travel through artist residencies. I know when I was starting out my career as an artist, I didn't know the first thing about trying to sustain myself in an artistic practice, or even calling it an artistic practice. I didn't know that's what people called it. I just called it my art. I've gone on a long, long journey these past 25 years of being an artist. I started making t-shirts, actually, in something very pop culture oriented as a graphic designer. And I also worked on radio as a radio host for an international hip hop radio show. And that's probably part of the reason why I felt like this format would be for me, because I do really love having conversations with amazing people, discovering new things, sharing music, and thinking about all the ways that creativity can actually show up in this world. I think I also underestimated the emotional toll that episode 3 would take on me. Episode 3 talked not only about my own journey with post-traumatic stress disorder, but it also talked about me losing my brother just 4 days before I graduated from Yale almost 22 years ago. I also shared about another classmate of mine who passed away, unfortunately not feeling very appreciated or loved in her time at Yale. Since that time, I actually lost another classmate to very similar circumstances, a bright and beautiful young queer man of color who I loved dearly, my friend Christopher Jordan. So we will consider episodes 1 through 3 as a real season, and the next few episodes will be season 2. I just wanted to share a little bit with you about what we learned in episodes 1 through 3. So in episode 1, I was sharing a lot of my international travels to understand a little bit more about the political situation that we're currently in. When I say that, you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about wars, specifically wars in the Middle East that have absolutely no purpose whatsoever. I'm talking about the war in Gaza. I'm talking about the Iran war. I'm talking about all this violence that's constantly scrolling across our screens. And so in episode 1, I spoke to the artist Michael Rakowitz, an Iraqi American Jew who is very passionate about talking about the after effects of the Gulf War, not only in his ancestral homelands, but also in the United States. This emotional arc of a very serious tone in episode 1 also shares a little bit of my journey going to the Middle East as a grown woman and experiencing a lot of what might be considered longing or even heartbreak. The experiences that I shared in that episode were a lot of poetry, a lot of performance footage, in addition to the interview with Michael Rakowitz. And then on episode 2, we have a completely different emotional arc, the emotional arc of humor. And in that episode, we have the Black Girls Kiki, and I'm speaking specifically to my friends Ayana Evans and Sade McConan about the ways that they navigated the art world in order to become more visible and more seen, but also sometimes how that visibility comes with a certain cost. I speak with Juliana Huxtable in episode 2 as well, specifically about her opinions about visibility as a form of liberation or not. And then lastly, in episode 3, there was a lot of emotional tension, and I was speaking a lot about my own personal experiences of feeling like I don't belong in an Ivy League environment. So this episode comes right on time to graduation season. I'm personally graduating. I am part of class of 2026 as the first person in my family on my father's side to become a doctor, and on any side of my family to get a PhD from an R1. A PhD means a doctorate of philosophy, and an R1 is the highest research standard of an institution in the United States. What this means is that 326 pages later, and if we count the years that I took off, 8 years later of me entering a PhD program to actually finish and submit my dissertation, this overwhelming sense of relief. And so now that I have this sense of relief and we are facing graduation, I would like to speak to all of you again. And in season 2, we're going to be hearing from 2 internationally renowned artists who are very passionate about the themes of performance studies in which I got my PhD, Liz Magic Laser and Nikita Gale. These 2 artists are artists that not only do I consider amazing and groundbreaking in the work that they do, I am also proud to call them my friends. I met Liz Magic Laser at Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture, which is essentially a summer-long artist residency program mostly geared towards those who just finished their education as artists. I was one of the oldest artists there. And one of the things that I really loved by being one of the oldest artists there is that I was able to connect with some of the faculty of the program, such as Liz, in a very meaningful way. And in season 2, Liz and I are going to talk about not only her work and finding ways to challenge and speak against the loss of freedom of speech that so many people in academia are experiencing right now, is that we are also educators who are very passionate about making sure that the freedom of speech that we have been able to use in our careers and our works is available for generations to come. We both work in the realm of satire. I'm going to share a play in progress that I've been writing that I premiered at Skowhegan called How to Catch a Predator, tentatively anyway. And it's about my experiences dealing with predatory behavior early on in my career. A lot of people might wonder, why don't you just call out the people who do the things? Well, we all know the reasons why. I think that every survivor's story is theirs to tell at the pace at which they are ready to tell it. Also in season 2, we're going to hear from Nikita Gale about some of the concepts of performance that resist against forms of visibility that are often demanded. And Nikita is a conceptual artist. And one of the things that we have in common is that we both started our artistic journey not at Yale, contrary to what people might believe, but in Atlanta, Georgia. Yes, that's right. Home of Outkast, TLC, and Martin Luther King. So, one of the things that both of us learned in Atlanta is that you can do whatever you want with your creativity. You can be a musician who does hair. You can be a stylist who dances. You can be a media personality who also writes scholarly books. Shout out to me. But I am saying that there's a lot of things that we learned in Atlanta that we'll be talking about that expanded our sense of what it means to both be visible and also to resist against that. Thank you so much for joining on this journey with me and still being willing to listen to the conversations that we're having in this creative community. It's a really hard time for a lot of people out there. It's been a really hard time for me for the past few years, actually, which is part of the reason it took me so long to get this next episode out. But I fiercely believe that as long as we're all together, we're going to get through this. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you continue to join me in season 2 of Rage to Master.